Just continuing on with the appointment process, you submit the projects on your intended submittal date, and a couple of things to be aware of. If you need to submit on the intended submittal date, the procedures say you can be 1 day late. If you're more than 1 day late, you have to make a new appointment for 6 weeks out. So make sure you submit on that day or not more than a day late. You can submit a couple of days ahead of time if you're worried about your carrier, UPS or FedEx or whatever, getting it there on time. If it's a couple of days early, that's okay. But make sure it's not more than 1 day late. And then also, just like for all projects, we'll do an intake review and make sure it's complete. If it's determined to be incomplete, you do need to make another appointment for 6 weeks out. So make sure you've got, and we'll talk about that just a little bit more here about the intake portion of the process. On your intended submittal date, you submit the drawings and specs, the fee, the cut sheets, geotechnical report, geohazards report, whatever you've normally been submitting. You submit the copy of the application again, and it's been changed now where you can actually put in the application number and indicate your, so we know which project it's for. If during, you're getting close to your 6 weeks, you're 2 or 3 weeks ahead of that, and you realize you're not going to make your date, go ahead and submit a new appointment email right away, because it'll be 6 weeks from the date you submit that email. Don't wait till the end. If you know you're going to be 3 weeks late, 3 weeks ahead of time, then submit the email then, and then there's a place on the form for a revised intended submittal date. You just fill out the registration form with a new date, and we'll schedule you from 6 weeks out from when we get the revised email.
And Dan, I just think the why of that, why 1 day late is important. It's because the amount of scheduling that the supervisors have to do that, and the number of projects that come through, if you're late, then that project's going to be given to someone else. So it creates a scheduling problem for what the staff has to do and the management has to do.
Right. So that's the registration process, and then as I mentioned, you submit the project documents on your submittal date. And as Chet said, DSA's commitment is to start within 5 days of receipt, 5 working days. In our Sacramento office, I think structural, we're pretty much on schedule for that. For fire and access, we're somewhat behind. Typically, structural takes longer, so hopefully you get the fire and access comments back before the structural comments anyway. We are adding more resources, though, to fire and access. We just had a new architect start yesterday to do access review. We've got another architect starting next Monday doing access review. And we should have a fire and life safety officer start by the end of the month. And we are adding more firms, consultant firms. We currently have 14 structural firms we use for structural review. For fire, we only had 2 firms, and access for 5 firms. But we went out to more contracts recently, and in Sacramento office, we're getting 6 more firms that can do fire and life safety review and 6 more that can do access. The training for those is this week and next week. So hopefully within a week or so, we'll have a lot more capacity there and get caught up on the fire and access also. Yeah.
Is there a plan to implement automation?
We got a microphone coming.
Sorry. Is there a plan to automate this process online so you can register and kind of see where you are in the queue instead of submitting forms?
Yeah. I'm not searching anything. I'm just trying to press the button. There is a plan right now to try to go all of our forms online, fillable forms. We're trying to work on it. I have to tell you, doing it in government is very difficult. There's lots of processes you go through. If you want to do it in your practice, you'd probably do it overnight. Here it takes over many nights, but we are going in that direction. I cannot tell you when it's going to happen because Enterprise Technology Services, which is our IT group, have a lot of things in the queue. So we're trying to move ours up to the top of that queue to get that done. For all forms, not just the ones you're talking about.
So any other questions about the appointment system? Okay, thanks. Chet mentioned electronic plan review. Pretty much we're doing most of it by paper now. We've done some electronic plan reviews, and we're doing quite a few electronic back checks now. Half of our back check stations have been set up with dual large monitors where if you get the paper check sets back, you can bring those in for back check, but you can upload your corrected drawings to Box, and then when you're in the office, you bring those up on the two large monitors in the back check station, and then we can verify that you've made all the corrections on the electronic set. If you need to make additional changes in the back check room, you can do that electronically while you're there too. And then at the end, once all the corrections have been addressed, then DSA will put an electronic stamp on that set and upload it to Box, so everyone has immediate access to the approved set of drawings and specs. And we would no longer have to scan those. So we've been doing that quite a while. Half our back check stations now have the large monitors, and we're in the process of getting those for the other half of the stations too. Chet mentioned that we've hired AECOM to assist in developing electronic plan review standards and processes and procedures, and then to do the training. I believe the training is supposed to be next month in April for our staff, and as he indicated, that the third quarter of this year will be pretty much 100% electronic in the plan review. So that is coming. The way the process will work is the architect will upload the drawings and specs, the documents to Box. DSA staff will move them over to Bluebeam, and we'll be using Bluebeam Project and Sessions and Studio to do the review in. And at some point in the process, then the architects and school districts will be given authority to look at the comments, and then the architect addresses the comments and uploads the corrected set for review. So then the next part of the process.
Dan, just one.
Sure.
Just a survey. How many of you folks are using Bluebeam now? We're trying to catch up. And we're happy that you're using it because we're going to learn from you as well. And remember, just like everything else, we're trying not to let the perfect get in the way of the good. We will start the process and we will make changes as we go along until we finally get it settled in to a place that we're all comfortable. But our staff is working hard and really trying to change. We were talking about change management. It's hard to go away from a pencil, to a mouse, but we're on our way.
Okay, thanks. And then the intake review, I mean, that's what Stephen's involved with, our engagement from our office, and we're having the structural plan reviewers do this now too. It's just to make sure your project is complete. We've been doing that for a long time. It's more efficient for DSA to review complete projects. There is a form, a DSA3, a project submittal checklist. It's required to be submitted with each project, and on that it lists what's needed for a complete submittal. So if you've got everything there, you should be in good shape. The DSA3 just underwent a major change recently. So there's, in each category of the form, there's two different sections. The first section is these documents are needed for a complete submittal, and then the second section is these documents are needed before the plans are approved. So make sure you pay attention to the ones that are required before for a complete submittal. One of the things that, on this slide is landscape irrigation. That is something that started a couple of years ago that DSA has been involved with. Even though the drought was officially over and it may be coming back, but the requirement hasn't gone away. And the requirement is to save water, which would save the school district's money in the long run. And if you have any new construction, new landscaping, it has to meet the new landscape requirements. And if you add a building to an existing site and the building's 1,600 square feet or larger, you have to rehabilitate landscaping equal to 75% of the footprint area of the building. So there's a procedure, 1503, that discusses that. And there's a form, a DSA-1L form, that you submit with a $400 or $500 fee. And with the form, you attach an 8.5 by 11 site plan of where you're going to do the rehabilitation. It doesn't have to be on that site. The rehabilitation area can be anywhere on any district site, so you have a lot of flexibility there. It's pretty much self-certification. The form needs to be completed and signed by an architect, a landscape architect, or a civil engineer, and we'll keep track of the building area, we'll keep track of the landscape area, of your you're rehabilitating. If you do more than required, more than the 75% of the footprint area, you can bank it and use it for future projects. So we're keeping track of that in our tracker database program now. We'll keep track of that for you.
Dan, can I add to that a little bit? I did neglect to mention the code development that we're having for Cal Green, and that is for the 2019 CBC, again, effective January 1st, 2020. We are proposing to provide electric vehicle charging for new school sites at K-12 and community colleges and high schools. Sorry, K-12 and community colleges, and also a shade tree requirement. And so that public outreach is happening on March 14th in the morning. Again, on our Cal Green Code webpage, there is that information, and so we also encourage you to participate in that code development. Thanks.
Okay. So the next phase, you'd submit your project, and we'll do 3 reviews: structural, fire, and access. They're concurrent reviews. Prior to just recently, a few months ago, we were moving work around between different offices. Some offices had more capacity than others, but lately all the offices have had a lot of work. Chet mentioned we received a lot of work recently. I think statewide, November through January, in those 3 months, we received $2 billion worth of work. So all the offices are doing overtime, and they're all using consultants now to keep up with the work. The workload in February slowed down some, but then March, we're projected to receive about $900 million worth of work. So everyone's really busy. We appreciate all the work everyone's sending us here. So, and then we mentioned Bluebeam already, and we talked about back check. So right now, back checks are happening in the regional office back check room. And we talked about electronic back check, and we aren't doing it yet, but it's part of the rollout for electronic plan review. I think one of the next things will be to do remote back check. So if the plans are all checked electronically, and we can do it electronic back checks, that if you're up in Reading or down in Fresno, you don't necessarily have to drive 3 or 4 hours to get to Sacramento to do a couple-hour back check. So that will be coming also.
A question, because DGS, which we're part of, has been using Zoom. They're looking to move to Skype. I think it's called Skype for Business, if I'm not mistaken. So just how many of you folks here are using Skype? Just a couple. Well, actually more. How many have been using Zoom? It's about the same amount. What we're looking to try to determine, he's put 2 hands up using Skype as double Skype. We're trying to figure out how to use this, because again, as you mentioned, driving 3 hours to, or whatever it is, to Fresno to do a 2-hour review doesn't make a lot of sense. So we're trying to work with you to do this the best way. I know we all want to have FaceTime. That's another one. But to be there in person. But I think it's going to be really important for us to all let go of that, do a little change management on ourselves, and begin to use it where appropriate on a virtual basis. How many are using any of those systems for design reviews and virtual plan reviews, et cetera? A few. I know Lionakis actually has a whatever you call it, a recording room or whatever. That might be the wave of the future, that we have to set up full systems. DSA does have the ability to do video conferencing. We've got good video conferencing equipment. We're also available to have you go to a local office in Los Angeles, San Diego, Sacramento, or Oakland, and sit in on a conference when appropriate. Obviously, we're using it for our internal work, but there's no reason why we couldn't use it to bring in offices to do reviews on projects. Are there any questions so far where Dan is gone? No? Okay, doing a great job.
Okay. In terms of delivery methods, design, build, lease back, DSA does have a publication on those delivery methods. It's DSA IRA-33. You might take a look at that. For design build, I think if you do use design build and you have your contractor on board, it would be good to bring them to the preliminary meetings too. The more people involved with the project that can come to the preliminary meetings, the better communication we have, and I think it's better for the project. If you have all the subcontractors also selected, you may not have the need for deferred approvals, such as elevators, skylights, or window wall systems. So that helps us too. If we have the whole project reviewed at once, I think it's more efficient than approving it and then having deferred submittals later. So I think that's an advantage of design build. One of our Southern California offices expressed some concerns that they're seeing about some design build projects, and that was, I think, the thought that they maybe don't need to be detailed as well because the architect and the contractor are working together, but we still need the same level of detailing as for all other projects. DSA needs to have the details in order to verify the project's code compliant, and the inspector needs to have the details to make sure it's being built in accordance with the approved plans. We do have another IR A-3 that's for construction management services on school projects. So if you're using a construction manager, you might want to take a look at that one also. I think they've both been updated recently. So the next part of the process, we finish back check, we approve the plans, DSA will issue the approval of plans letter, and then the architect and school district need to sign the DSA-5. It's the project inspector qualification approval form to submit to DSA for the inspector you want to use. That is reviewed in the Sacramento office by Jim McCarthy. He's our field supervisor. He reviews all of them and approves those. A reason we may not approve an inspector is if they already have too much work. They're doing too many other projects. But you can talk to Jim if there's any concerns about that. And then once you get the Form 5 approved, you submit the DSA 102 IC form. IC is for inspection card. And that will list, you'll list there everyone you involved with a project that you want to be part of DSA box. It used to be when we started box in the inspection card, I think it was June of 2013. This is when box was created. Now with the appointment system, we've been running for the last 6 months, the box is set up when you register for an appointment. So, but you won't know who the contractor is, so at the 102 IC stage, you can add a lot more people, everyone involved during construction. The contractor, the inspector, the testing lab, their names and email addresses. So that's the next step in the process. We will, when we get the 102 IC, we'll issue the inspection cards and we'll upload those to Box also.
Is anybody having any problems with the 102C? Because I keep hearing that there's some issues related to making changes, et cetera. Does everybody understand that you can change and you can move stuff around? That's up to you as an owner or an architect or an engineer. Any questions about that one? Okay.
One thing on the inspection card, when you submit your plans, each building has to have a unique identifier, 1, 2, 3, or ABC, or some combination. So, sometimes we'll see just a bunch of portables in a row, and they won't be identified. But there's an inspection card for each building, an inspection card for the site work. So just make sure you have a unique identifier. Otherwise, that'll be a plan review comment. So after we approve the plans, there's some post-approval documents that need to be submitted to DSA, deferred submittals, as I mentioned before. If you have any of those, we'll review and approve those. And then revisions and addendums and construction change documents. I think in the design bid build process, we define revisions as something that occurred after we stamped the plans, but before you went out to bid. And we defined addendums as you were out to bid before you awarded a construction contract, and construction change documents, which were change orders, RFIs, ASIs, things like that, as after you awarded a construction contract. Now with design build, maybe those definitions are blurred, but I think the main thing is for any changes that involve structural fire access, you need DSA review and approval, and you need to get that approval before you actually construct any of those changed items. And we also recommend, start a construction. If you have a pre-construction meeting, you invite the DSA field engineer to the meeting. Hopefully they can attend. If not, maybe they can attend by teleconference, and they can discuss, DSA's expectations of the inspector and the contractor and design professional. And I think it helps the projects go more smoothly. If you have a pre-construction meeting and DSA is involved, just so there's no surprises later on. And then for construction oversight, the responsibilities of the different people involved. The school district needs to hire the project inspector and the testing lab, and the architect submits the Form 5 and the 102 IC. They oversee the project inspector. They also visit all the design professionals, visit the site periodically during design, and sign off on the inspection cards, different sections of the inspection cards. Everyone involved, the design professionals, the lab, and the inspector sign off the 4 different sections of the inspection card for each building in the site as it progresses. And that's really helped us get the high certification rate that Chet's talked about 93% statewide for inspection card projects. So if there's a problem, somebody can't sign off, that project problem's identified. If work has to stop on that part of the project, it's stopped until it gets fixed. And so when you get to the end of the project, you don't have any outstanding issues. So the inspector responsibilities, they have it pretty tough. They are employed by the school district, work under the direction of the architect, but they're also approved by DSA and report to DSA and overseen by DSA. So they have 3 different bosses they have to please. And they do inspection of everything in the plans and specs, not just the structural, fire, and access, but all the different issues. There's an inspector task force Jim will talk about in just a minute here. We're hearing reports that there's a shortage of inspectors in some parts of the state, and he's got a task force that's looking into that and trying to deal with that. So Jim, you want to mention that a little bit?
Are there any of your districts that have been struggling to try and find inspectors at this time? Okay, yeah, so it is an issue, and as the more money becomes available, and it's tough to find inspectors, particularly in some of the outlier areas. But what we did is we tried to tackle that issue, and we know that this is coming and that there's a shortage. At one point in time, about around 2008, I think we had 1,400 project inspectors that were certified. We're now down to about 1,000, and as of last year, only 700 of the 1,000 actually did work on school projects. So the number of active inspectors is quite low, as I'm sure demand rises and the fees rise that inspectors are going to have to be paid. We'll probably get more people coming back into the show. But basically, the task force looked at several things, and we made several recommendations on how we can improve on bringing inspectors back into the fold. We've modified the examination that the project inspectors have to take. They can now pass by sections, much like the architects and the engineers can do. They don't have to pass everything all in one day. We've been modifying, and we're currently in the process of reassessing the qualifications that an inspector or a candidate needs to meet to take an examination. So that's being worked on and will be part of our next cycle of code changes. We're looking at a system, a learning management system program. Many of you, I'm sure you're aware of Blackboard. This is the program that we're in the process of procuring. So in the next year to 2 years, we're hopeful that we'll have the examinations online, or at least through testing centers, so that inspectors can take the examination when they need to, and on their schedule, not just on the few times that we offer the examinations, as well as the training courses. The nice part about that system is when we currently offer training to inspectors or training to structural engineers or architects, if we go to the online system, we'll actually have the ability to reach out and touch all of you. Any of you can take those classes. When we make our code amendment course that we typically do every time we have a triennial cycle, it'll be available to all of you, not just to the select few that need to qualify for performing consulting work for us. So those are some of the changes that we've been doing. I think the last thing we're also doing is we've been looking and trying to work with some of the community colleges to look at the potential for utilizing students in either community colleges, and we maybe extend it to the UC and the Cal State programs as well, to allow students to come in as interns as project inspectors and to learn under those programs to gain qualifying credit and that way encouraging younger people into the profession. So we're doing a lot to try and tackle this issue, and just want to make sure you know we are.
Okay, thanks, Jim. So during construction in Box, it's open to everyone involved in the construction process. That's where the inspection cards are uploaded, as I mentioned, and construction change documents. We've been doing this for a couple of years now, 2 or 3 years, where all the construction change documents are uploaded to Box, and we're reviewing those electronically using Bluebeam, and then the approved, the check sets are uploaded to Box for the architects to respond to, and then the approved CCDs are also uploaded to Box. Box also has other things, the interim inspection cards, final verified reports, other construction documents such as the project inspector's semi-monthly reports and deficient lab reports, anything that involved with the process. And with, I think one of the nice things about Box, everyone's responsible for uploading their own documents. So if something's not there, you know who was supposed to upload it. So it's transparent from that standpoint. And then Chet talked about project certification a little bit. When you start the construction phase, there's 3 different categories of projects: those that are under construction, those that are occupied without certification, and those that are certified. We all want to try to get certified projects. The timing is that once occupancy occurs, DSA will start the certification process, and you've got 60 days, 2 months to get all the documents in. And if we don't have everything by the end of the first 60-day period, we'll issue a DSA Form 301N. N stands for non-public. It just goes to the people involved with the project, and it'll list all the missing items we need in order to certify the project. And then you have another 2 months in the 60 days, so 4 months total from occupancy to get all the rest of the documents into DSA, or actually just uploaded to Box. And if we get all the documents that are required within that second 60-day period, we'll issue a certification letter, which is what the goal is. If not, we'll issue a 301P form. P is for public, and then that form goes into certification box. And that's on DSA's website. Everyone can go in there and look at certification box, and it's organized by school district and then by campus within the school district. And it should have a list of all the 301Ps that have been issued on that campus and all the old closed without certification letters that have been issued on that campus. So you can take a look at certification box. We do have a project certification guide on DSA's website, particularly if you have older projects. Chet mentioned the legacy projects and the transition projects that you still have some that are uncertified. If you look at the project certification guide, chapter 5, talks about alternate processes. There's different alternate processes you can use. If you can't get certain documents, it'll give you guidance on what other things you can do to get your project certified. And if you still have questions, talk to Harlan Raymont in our office. He's the supervisor over the certification section, and he can help walk you through that.
Let me just add a piece here. When we put together the certification guide, one of the things that we were concerned about is what if the architect, everybody's dead, gone, they're not around, how do you handle that? And we came up with some methods by which you could hire, a district could hire another architect or another engineer to go through and take care of the certification. But that's dependent, quite frankly, and I'm putting on my practitioner hat and my old AIA hat and say, wait a second, I don't want that responsibility of taking on that building and taking care of certification. I'm willing to do the work, and I'm willing to take responsibility for what I can see or what I do, but I can't take on responsibility of somebody else's work. This is a place that the district needs to look at hold harmless agreements or responsibility agreements to make sure that it's fair. I know that the districts in general want to put the risk off on somebody else, but that's a piece of risk that most of the architects and most of their insurance companies cannot cover. So I urge the districts to look at, okay, if we want to get this certified, let's be fair with the architect or the engineer. Let's give them a hold harmless agreement for things that they cannot discover, hold them responsible for their professional services. I urge you to think about that, because otherwise we're never going to be able to get some of those buildings certified, and you're going to be up a creek trying to make sure that you can move on to the next modernization on that building or what have you. So be careful with that. And I know that you struggle with the attorneys who are looking to, and it's their job to protect the districts. But on the other hand, we've got the purpose of the whole certification is to make sure that we protect the kids, the people that occupy the buildings, and move forward. Are there any questions related to this whole thing? Because we get calls about it all the time, but yes?
If you discover work that is that you find is deficient, that needs to be adjusted, let's say, to get certification, is there a process? You don't have to do a whole new application number. You can get contractors involved to do the work to fix it. It's part of that process and not have to.
Yes. If you you can fix it under the application number that's uncertified. If you're just finishing the work, say they didn't build an access ramp or something, you can finish the work and under the previous application, right? And there's another option. You can, or if you have structural details that need to be repaired that were never repaired, you can do that under the application. And once all the work's done, we can certify the project. You also, if you've got another project, you may be able to link the old project certification with the new project certification, where if you have to do, you need to get all the documents in you can that are not related to any construction or any destructive testing. But if you have construction or destructive testing where you need to get a contractor out there, and you say you've got a new modernization project, we can have that work, additional work to get the old project complete, put in the new application, and then link the certification of the old project to the new project. And that's discussed in the certification guide in Chapter 5 there.
We were looking for every single way that we could possibly help you get your projects certified. And if somebody has some other ideas, although I think we've covered them all, but if you have some other ideas on how we can make that easier and better, we want to hear about them. And any other thoughts?
Was there another question too? Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Thanks. One thing on certification, Chet mentioned, I think the certification rate for inspection cards is about 93%. So it's only about 7% of uncertified inspection card projects. So it's working really well, much better than the old system. And even on those 7%, the inspector is required to upload to Box an occupied verified report, plus, if not all the work's done, a Form 211, and it'll list all the things that are missing. So, for instance, if the only thing missing is they didn't put the signage in the parking lot for the accessible parking, that'll be listed. So then everyone knows that's the only thing that needs to be done to get your project certified. So it's much easier than looking through these old files and some of these real old projects where it's difficult to tell what was inspected and what was not and what you need to do to get it certified. So hopefully even the uncertified ones, it's a much clearer path to get certification. And then in terms of the fees, the district is required to submit, the one form the district has to submit at the end of construction is the Form 168, where they sign that that's the final cost of the project. On the 168 form, I think the first line is this is the contracted amount. The next line is, I believe, the increases due to change orders, and then there's a line for construction management costs if you have that. And then the sum of those three is the final cost of the project. That's compared to the estimated costs when you submit the DSA1 at the beginning of the project, and if additional fees are required, then that would need to be submitted to certify the project too. So we have been, for the last couple of years, also charging for review of change documents, addendums, and CCDs and revisions. And we'll compare in the closeout process, certification process, we'll compare the additional fees required due to change orders that's on the 168 compared to what we reviewed and charged an hourly rate for, and just make sure we're not double dipping and not charging you twice for the same thing. So there's a process in place to do that. The last slide here is on pre-checks plans. These are plans that are submitted by manufacturers of different types of structures, and they get them approved by DSA. And you can use those in over-the-counter appointments or in regular projects too, as a portion of a larger project. And PC started off many years ago just as relocatable buildings, one little building size. Now they have grown into lots of different building sizes, different roof slopes, different types of foundations, a lot of different options in these PCs. And a lot of manufacturers have multiple PCs. And then in addition to relocatable buildings, there's PCs for modular buildings, shade structures, solar structures. We're seeing a lot of solar structure projects these last couple of years, and carports, bleachers, scoreboards, elevators, and ramps. So there are a lot of different types of PCs. So you can use those in over-the-counter appointments. And in an over-the-counter appointment, you can submit the project and get it reviewed and approved the same day. You bring in your PC drawings and then your site drawings that will show where the say, relocatable building's located with the utility hookup sheets, and you should be able to get it reviewed and approved the same day. We do have a publication, Policy PL 0702, on over-the-counters, and so it will tell you how many different options or different types of PCs you can have in one appointment. So take a look at that too. Did you have something?
Yeah, we see, I think we talked about a little bit earlier, we are looking at a change in the construction industry where there's going to be more prefabricated components. We're not quite sure what we're going to do with this, how we're going to do it, but we know we're going to have to change. There's going to be wall panels or roof panels or components of some sort that we need to make sure are approved, but yet the manufacturers want to stockpile them and then bring them out to a site and collect them, et cetera. So we don't know how we're going to do this yet, but we're trying to prepare ourselves for that fairly dramatic change in the construction process. We know that, as an example, the boxcars that we're using are being prefabricated and brought in as components. How do you we've actually got some of those container that have been brought in, and we've actually put them together as buildings. Where is this going? How is this going to happen? All you have to do is go here in Sacramento onto, I think it's 16th Street, and see that apartment building that entire units, bathrooms, et cetera, were all dropped in and put up on a mid-rise building. So be prepared. We're trying to prepare ourselves for whatever you wind up doing downstream.
And for the over-the-counter appointments, you still make over-the-counter appointments the same way you always have. You call in, make an appointment. It's separate from the appointment system. The appointment system are for the regular projects, but we still have it's the appointment system we've always had for the over-the-counter projects. And one thing to note about the PCs is we're continuing to allow the use of 2013 code PCs through the end of May of this year, but then starting June 1st, you'll need 2016 code PCs for your over-the-counter appointments. And then one reason for the delay of using the new code PCs is because this is the first time we came up with a criteria for the different types of PCs, the design and review criteria, and Jim's going to talk about that just for a little bit too.
Yes, this was a very difficult topic because for many, many years we've been just rolling over PCs. If a manufacturer had an approved building set of plans, the next code cycle, if there were no changes to it, we would just automatically roll it over. Well, what was happening is too many of these were occurring. There were many that would come in that were changed. So a same manufacturer might have old ones that have been carried over, might have new ones which met new code criteria. Now imagine that over all the different manufacturers, and we just had this hodgepodge of various different buildings under various different codes. And so it was just time. It was time, and as a result, what was happening is if you had a building that was approved out of a Sacramento regional office, you might submit it down to a Southern California office, and they may not accept what had already been previously approved. So we were running into a lot of consistency issues, and Lord knows that DSA is always consistent. So what we did was we created a process by developing these design criteria, and for the first time in I think DSA's history, 70 plus years, we had every single supervisor from the plan review side, on the design side, in a room, and we went through every one of these topics. And these design criteria are incredibly thorough. They cover virtually everything. Diane, if you would like to stand up again and take full credit for this, because this was an incredible process. Again, first time in 70+ years we've had every single supervising engineer on the same page in agreement.
We hope.
We hope. Think about that, though. I mean, that's pretty incredible. And you know, and I will say that I think this particular effort is, you know, for all the fantastic things Chet's led through this organization, this one is maybe the biggest thing that's ever happened from the structural side, and that is just to get our team and our engineers on the same page is pretty incredible. And what we actually hope is, in all that work and in all that effort, they're the same principles and engineering elements that are in all your other buildings. So by having gone through this effort, it's actually going to pay dividends for any and all construction down the road in all 4 offices. And I have to say that we work very, very hard to try and make consistency happen. We have statewide teams that meet monthly, from both the field side, the plan review side. The managers meet weekly. And we take consistency issues very, very, very seriously, and we work extremely hard at doing that. So hopefully next year at this time, if I ask, has anybody run into a consistency problem in DSA, nobody will raise their hand. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, thanks, Jim. So that was the last slide. Are there any questions for me or Jim, Ida, or George? Yes.
I just had a question about the CalGreen review process. Speak to that a little bit. Is it integrated into the process? Is it in the access review process, or is it a separate document?
It's a separate process, just with CalGreen. And we had 2 task force meetings, outreach to school districts and other stakeholders earlier in the year. And now our regulations are actually on our website, and you can participate in the process at our public meeting March 14th. It's on our CalGreen code page. And if you are signed up and subscribed to our listserv, you should have received notification of that. And so if you're not subscribed, we encourage you to do so. But they are on our CalGreen webpage.
Did we answer your question? Somewhat. Well, I don't like the somewhat part. What didn't we answer?
Yeah, well, I found that sometimes we get CalGreen comments and sometimes we don't, and sometimes we're asked for a separate submittal and sometimes we're not. So I'm not really clear as to what the process is for the CalGreen review.
You mean in the approval process?
Yes.
A lot of the CalGreen, well, Dan.
Well, my understanding is we're just checking to make sure it says it complies under the code sections that are listed, that it complies with the CalGreen code currently, I believe.
Right. So for projects that are submitted, for construction projects, they are pretty much self-certification. And we do a CalGreen review for PC projects. But we don't do a holistic CalGreen. It's really more making sure that the information's there and that you self-certify.
Okay, so
And
as long
we
as
should
we have the
remember-
sheets.
We should remember that we have not adopted all of CalGreen. We're in the process of adding a couple more items. That's what Ida was talking about earlier. At some point, and we'll talk about a little bit at lunchtime, the questions, how far should we go? Should we do a sustainability review here at DSA? We don't do it now. We'll talk about it in those questions. But we do adopt pieces of CalGreen at this particular point.
Thank you. That does answer my question. Thank you.
Okay.
Other? Yeah. You go ahead. Just stand up and.
I'll speak up.
Okay, we'll repeat it.
On electronic plan reviews, on occasion we are required to draw detail at bag check. So I'm wondering how you guys are implementing that with the computer process. You know, I can always draw detail faster on paper. Is there still the ability to draw that and scan it and then drop it into a set of documents?
Yes, we just recently in all the back check rooms got multifunction printers and scanners. So if you draw on a piece of paper, you could scan it on the scanner in the back check room and upload it to your file.
Which brings up an interesting point. I'm going to move to construction oversight. We have the ability right now, the technology, all of us, to take a photograph of an issue out on the job site. And if you got a problem area and you've got to change some bolted connections from 3 bolts to 2 larger bolts or something, there is nothing wrong with taking a photograph of it, using that as the image, marking it up, sending it, whether you're sending it in as a photograph as part of a CCD. We need to learn, and it's hard for us, all of us, because we're not used to that. And I recognize that DSA's been used to, you got to have it on this 8.5 by 11 form, and it's got to look a certain way. We're interested in trying to move away from that and move towards the quality of the work as opposed to just the image of it. So I urge you to work this through, and I know that we're going to have some pushback by some folks in the field, our folks. They're not used to this yet. But over the next period of time, I'm hoping that we can use that technology to, again, shorten the time down. We've got to save this money, $70 billion, $3.5 billion a year going up in smoke. Our job is to try to reduce that. And if we can use some technology such as the camera that's in my pocket or on an iPad or whatever you've got, let's do it. Let's find out a way to be more efficient.
Question over here.
Yeah, my question was regarding PCs. So if you have like a manufacturer delivers like a shade structure or a carport or something, and it doesn't quite go together right, so you have to make some alterations for your particular site, who's responsible for that change and like the engineering side of things? Like say you need to change a bolt size, or is it the manufacturer that needs to change their parts they've sent that don't fit together? Or is it something we go through with an engineer, go to you for?
You would need to submit the change to DSA. If you're changing the structure, it's a structural change, you need to submit to DSA. So on the DSA-1 form, there's an architect or engineer responsible charge of the project, and that's who DSA would be viewing as being responsible for getting it submitted to DSA and then for the verified reports. So from DSA's standpoint, it would be the architect listed or engineer on the DSA-1. In terms of the contractual arrangements, that would be between the school district and the contractor and the architect.
Okay.
Did we get that answered for you, or okay? We were able to turn around this whole idea that the architect wound up being totally responsible for the design of PCs, even though they didn't design them. That is an important change as a protection for the architects and engineers that have responsibility. I was very concerned about that when I came on, because I can't remember how many times I wound up being responsible for something I knew, had no control over. You now have control over it. Contractually, that's a separate issue, because the project, it now came out and it was essentially faulty if it wouldn't connect together. My gosh, get it done so that DSA can get the project approved, and then go fight with the manufacturer or the manufacturer's engineer or whatever in terms of the financial side of it. But our job is to make sure that it's done, and let's get it done quickly.
Ian over here. Right here. Can you stand up? Yeah, sure. Okay. And
she's got the mic for you right there.
So along with the electronic back check, we just experienced this in Oakland. The computers that were in the back check room were woefully underpowered to even open the file in a timely manner. So, I mean, you mentioned you're buying new equipment. I just wanted to see where you were on that. And I had a second question when you were when we answered that one.
My understanding is not the equipment, because we just bought new equipment. Our problem is that we do, for whatever reason, they pulled the servers out of Los Angeles, Oakland, and San Diego. No, I'm sorry, San Diego maintained theirs. They pulled the servers out, and that caused us a major problem. They were trying to go central to here in Sacramento. So what they're doing now is they're putting these servers back into the local place. They've already done They rebuilt the ones in San Diego, put new ones in San Diego. Oakland's up next. Los Angeles we're moving to new offices, so hopefully by June. So we're not going to replace those servers until after we make the move. It just doesn't make sense. I'm sorry about that. That's really a problem, but it's really the power on the servers. I'm not an expert on this. I also know that last week or 2 weeks ago, we had a failure. All of a sudden, the whole thing crashed in the middle of a back check. And we're trying to figure out, we still don't know all the reasons for that. Stuff happens, folks. We're sorry about it. You had a second, I don't know if I answered your first question.
No, you did. That's perfect. And then my second was more kind of a code-related clarification question. We're experiencing this on a project in terms of definition of hallway versus corridor, and they got removed in the 2016 code, but it was in like the 2013 or the 2009 code, and some clarification from you guys would be great.
As it relates to exiting or fire and life safety?
Both.
Oh, okay.
Well, there is no definition of hallway in code. That was taken out quite some time ago. So what you have right now is either a corridor that's rated or not rated, but it's still a corridor. So what was a hallway before? Nothing but a non-rated corridor. That's the term they tried to use. What you also saw happen in 2016 is you actually ended up with a definition for a corridor. If you go backwards in code, you find that a corridor wasn't really defined in code. It was left up to the code official to determine whether or not it was a corridor. So that's what happened with that.
So did that solve your issue?
Yeah, I was just more asking like if you had any plans to update it further for 2019, or if that was
no.
You guys think you're good to go? Then
remember, we don't write that code.
We don't write. What you're talking about is model code. We don't write model code. You're talking about an ICC issue. So we're not. That's nothing that really we have control over, and there's really no reason to put a hallway back in.
Any other questions?
On a previous project where it seems there's a new code provision such that 5% is now the threshold for locally strengthening an element rather than that 10% and then you do the global. Can you talk a little bit about the logic behind that and how you guys developed that?
4-309C is a global building trigger. The 5% is actually an elemental trigger in 4-309A. And so if you're modifying an element and you're not triggering any kind of a structural required rehabilitation for the building, then that's going to be you would be following the 4-309A 5% on that element.
That's new as of this code cycle, right?
That was 2016. That was clarified in 2016, that's correct.
So presume, because the issue we ran into, and it impacts the architectural, I'm a structural engineer, but it impacts the architectural too, because we try to work with our architects to minimize the amount of rehabilitation we have to do on the existing building system. And presumably with the previous code cycle we could go up to 10%, or cut 10% openings in the existing shear wall, for example, without triggering anything. And now we're only allowed to go up to 5%.
No.
Before, if we're under 10% but over 5%, we still have to do the local strengthening. So I was just kind of wondering how that was developed and the logic behind that in general, and how you guys decide to put that in.
We can actually get into the details on a side conversation if you'd like, but I don't believe what you're saying is true. You were not allowed to just alter any element up to 10% and not have to do anything to it. So that's not a true statement. So we always were having to bring it up to code compliance. In fact, there was no 5% or 10%. What we did is we actually gave you up to 5% this time, which actually improves your situation.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to have a sidebar about that.
Good.
Any other questions?
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for what you're doing. Appreciate it.